Welcome to Raising the Flipping Bar, the go-to podcast for aspiring and seasoned real estate investors. I'm your host, Derek Marlin, and I'm the CEO of Elevation. We're a real estate investment company based right here in Denver, Colorado. We'll dive into smart investment strategies, market insights, and essential tips for scaling your real estate ventures. Whether you're making your first investment or your 100th investment, this podcast is your blueprint for success in the ever-evolving world of real estate investing. Get ready to elevate your real estate game and begin your journey with me. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Raising the Flipping Bar. I'm your host, Derek Marlin, and I'm definitely excited to have an agent, an author, a speaker, and a team leader and a community builder. We're going to talk about motivation. We're going to talk about mindset. And we're also going to get into some things at the end of the podcast to talk about the value of real estate in college and how those things go together. So welcome, Mr. Dan Gomer, to Raising the Flipping Bar.
Thank you. It sounds like you have a few people in the room today.
Man, this is just you. You have a great background and a great resume. So I'm excited to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get into kind of the meat and potatoes of the episode, I always love to have either a fun fact or a crazy fact, or like tell our audience something about you that hopefully either doesn't say you haven't never shared, but like probably not in a social forum or a business forum. So like tell us something new, crazy, different, unique.
Yeah. So most people don't know this, but I know how to tie balloon animals. I actually used to do it for a living in high school.
No way.
That's how I earned my party money. I would go into restaurants and I would tie balloon animals for the kids, and I'd work for tips. And
I love it. Okay. So I always recap every once in a while. So we now have a professional balloon tire. We have a person who was a professional poker player before she got into real estate and played the World Series of Poker. And then we had a guy who was not special ops, but was in the military doing super top secret stuff that he couldn't even tell me about. So we have lots of unique people like with unique skills.
I want to talk to the professional poker player. That's I want to play in the World Series one day.
So we'll get her on. Shout out to, do you know Moore Zucker?
I do. Yeah. Well, not really, but we've talked a few times.
I mean, not only is she a badass agent and runs a great team, but yeah, she was a professional poker player for like 6 years before she got into real estate. And she still plays in the World Series fairly often.
Really?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, she does. So that's a whole nother episode. And actually, speaking of, so you have actually an awesome poker tournament that I just played in for the first time. And that was big and that was fun. And it like went late. And I told my wife, I'm like, oh, I'll be home in 15 or 20 minutes. And I was the crazy guy that got lucky enough to be at the final table. And I look at my watch and it's like 1:00 in the morning. And there's some really good poker players at that tournament.
Yeah, totally. It was a shit show. This year was a shit show. Oh my gosh. It was funny, but it was a mess.
Yeah, no, that was super fun. So balloon tying, that's awesome. I want to kind of talk a little bit about your background as well. So you've got a background in teaching. You were a middle school science teacher, right? Is that right?
8th grade.
8th grade. Oh, God bless you. We could have another whole podcast episode.
That would be fun.
But I would love to know kind of how did teaching help shape what you're doing now in your real estate from a coaching and a mentoring and all that? A lot of stuff probably had to translate, honestly.
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that question, just because right now I'm really dialing into teachers in real estate. And the reason is because I've been told ever since I got into real estate and I started seeing some success, like, oh, well, you were successful because you were a teacher, and teachers make great real estate agents. And I never really put too much thought into it. I was like, okay, we're community builders, we're people, it's that kind of thing, right? And so never really put too much thought into it until I brought another teacher onto our team, and she's crushing it. I've just started like really thinking about it. I'm like, what is it about a teacher that makes them such a good real estate agent? And it finally dawned on me the other day that we get thrown to the wolves as teachers, and it's like, so I remember my very first day in education. I was 24 years old. And I was in an inner city school. Most of the kids spoke Spanish, but I would say probably a quarter of the kids only spoke Spanish. I don't speak Spanish at all. Yeah. They handed me a notebook, like a 3-ring binder, and they were like, here's your curriculum for the year. Good luck. See you later. And they just like threw me to the wolves, and it was just like, figure it out. And there was no option. You figure it out. That's how my entire career was in education. And that's how everybody's career is in education. There's just not enough resources to hold your hand. And I think that's what really actually makes teachers so good at real estate is they're resilient, they're resourceful, they're people, they're community builders, they're learners, they're teachers, they're all of these things that just are great qualities to have as a real estate agent. And so I don't know that I could put my finger on like what's been the most important in real estate, but one of the things I'm very grateful for, that I would say I'm most grateful for from my career as a teacher, is the resourcefulness that it created within me.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. No, it makes a ton of sense. You're right. Being thrown to the wolves is, I feel like, what we do in real estate all day, every day. No matter what training we have, no matter what systems we have in place, there's always something new, something crazy, and something out of left field. So
Yeah, totally.
that's cool. Nice. So you've been in real estate about, is it 12 years now?
13.
13 years now. I don't like it when people say, like, tell me about your journey, because that could be super long or whatever. But I always like to think of it in milestones. So maybe tell people your background, but in a couple of different milestones, because you've evolved and done a lot of different things over the last 13 years in real estate.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've learned very quickly in real estate is there's a million different ways to make money in real estate. When I first got into it, I left teaching to do fix and flips. And the reason that I did that was because I had a construction background. I used to frame houses with my brother. I actually took a year off after I graduated college. I was supposed to stay in Hawaii the whole time, stayed for like 3 months. That's a story for another time. But came back and ended up finishing basements with my brother, and I was building fences. And so I just had a construction background. When I left education, I was like, I'm going to go flip houses. I'll be able to work with my hands again and be my own boss and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of the plan. Did that for a few years and found out that it was a really difficult way to make money in real estate. You guys have all the systems and processes in place that make it much smoother.
Yeah.
I didn't have that. I was a one-man wrecking crew, and it was ugly.
Yeah.
I was flipping houses, and then I eventually got my license, and then I started learning that there's a lot of other ways to make money in real estate. So I eventually transitioned into more of a traditional sales kind of model and built my business up from there. Built a fairly successful business. I got to the point where I'd set a milestone for myself, which was 40 deals, 400K GCI in 1 year. And that was just kind of my marker. When I hit it, it was kind of like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Climb that mountain. All right. And I kind of lost my drive to push it, So I regrouped at that point. And once again, what do I want to do now? I was thinking about leaving real estate, and ultimately ended up landing on the EXP model and came over to the EXP platform because I realized that I didn't really want to sell anymore, especially at that level. Sure. But I love teaching and I love coaching. I realized that I could take everything that I learned throughout my journey and I could put it together and I could package it up and I could help other people grow their businesses and change their lives through real estate like I did. So that's when I transitioned more into a team lead, where now I'm much more focused on, like, how do I help other people become successful in real estate, as opposed to going out and doing all the sales myself. I still sell, but trying to transition out of that and just strictly into teaching and coaching.
Okay. To kind of put a little context to it, what were the years that you were doing your fix and flips roughly?
Yeah. So I started, I bought my first one in June of 2011. Oh, wow. And then I sold my last one probably right around Memorial Day of 2014 or 20, was it 14 or 15? Yeah. I think it might've been 15. I remember that vividly because it was one of our torrential downpour years of rain, and we'd already sold this house. And the roof started leaking like a week after we sold it, because it was like 3 weeks of just like nonstop rain. Yeah, and the basements were flooding and all this stuff. We just could not get away from this deal. We lost 30 grand on it. It was just a kick in the teeth over and over and over again. So when we walked away from that one, I was like, I'm good. Yeah. I think that's my last one.
Well, and that was a weird time because it was obviously right at the tail end of the housing crash. So at that point, quote unquote, things had bottomed in 2009, 2010, depending upon what data you look at and whatever else. But that was still a weird time. I don't feel like the market really started to take off until 2014. So you had that weird kind of crazy bookend, which I think is honestly what we're looking at now too. Just a weird time post COVID run up of halfway through 2022 through now. And I think we'll probably see this weird 2 years and then it'll probably be fairly strong again. But yeah, those are just weird times in real estate.
Yeah. Yeah. It was harder to get deals. In the beginning, it was great. And then it just got harder and harder to get deals, which is why I lost money. Yeah. I was just hoping that this one would work out, making poor decisions.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I get it. And then one more thing, I don't know whether it's your best year, but your 40 and 400 year, what year was that?
2020.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great year, but that's a good, another inflection point too of that's right when COVID started. And so you had this monster year, but it's like, well, what's the point?
It's all I did was work. I think a really good, like if somebody wants general balance in their life in real estate, I feel like 15 to 20 deals a year is perfect.
Yes.
You could do that if you're an expert, if you're a pro, you could do that standing on your head. You could do that 15, 20 hours a week and maybe 25 and make a good living. You're not jet setting around the world and buying a yacht, but you got a good living, a good life. You've got plenty of time to spend with your friends and family and all that kind of stuff. It's a great way to live your life, but doing 40 and beyond, it's a different lifestyle.
Yeah. Totally.
When you get up into those higher levels of sales and things like that, all I was doing was working, and it was not the lifestyle that I wanted to lead anymore. The money was great, and at some point, money's money. It's cool for a little bit.
Yeah.
But at some point, it becomes about life.
No, 100%. Well, and I think that's a good, I don't want to say segue, but I'm curious to hear a little bit about your transition from when we were at your castle together, which for those of you guys that don't know, was one of the largest independent brokerages in Colorado. It was supposedly very investor centric. And that was a big part of your change, was like that burnout. And really, what were you looking for? I know you have an amazing story about your trip to Costa Rica that I want you to talk about too, but like, how was that transition? How that all come down?
When I left your castle, I told everybody when I left, I was like, listen, if I wasn't going to EXP, I would just be leaving the industry altogether. I'm like, it's not you guys. I need something different. After 2020, I was so stressed out and just overwhelmed and frustrated because I'm like, what am I doing with my, okay, great. So now I put all this time and energy into building a real estate business. It's finally firing on all cylinders. And I'm like, I don't want to do it anymore. It's like, what is wrong with you? Why can't I just like go with it, So it was pretty frustrating, but my plan was to become a speaker. I finished my book in 2020. I developed a whole coaching program that was getting really good. I was getting really good feedback from that. I've got lots of stories with that, that's what I'm really passionate about. So I'm like, I'm just going to do that. And then I found out about EXP and I'm like, oh, this is a great stepping stone. So it's really difficult to build a coaching career, to build a speaking author, to build a career with that. It takes a lot of time. And it's very unstable. So EXP became my platform to be able to coach and teach and lead and do all the things that I love to do and still sell real estate and still be in this industry that has changed my life for the better. And now I get to do the same thing for other people. So it just ended up being a perfect fit.
Nice. That's awesome. I do want to talk a little bit about the flipping side of it, because obviously we're on raising the flipping bar. I think that's a big interest for our audience. So again, framing it for you guys in the audience, Dan was flipping from 2011 to 2014. So that was a kind of a crazy, tough time. Remind me, did you have a partner when you were doing that, or was it just solo?
Yeah. Troy Springston. He's still a friend of mine. Actually, just hung out with him last weekend or whatever, 2 weekends ago. Okay. Super good guy. We had a great time. At first, I was doing it by myself. Okay. And then Troy was a York Castle guy, and we got connected, and we just hit it off. So we started working together for a few years. After that last flip, we both just kind of threw our hands up in the air. He just started a business with his brother doing AV stuff. So installing TVs and wiring and all that stuff in these giant houses. He's crushing it with that. I kind of went off and started doing sales.
Yeah. Did you guys feel like you had like similar skill sets or complementary skill sets, or like what drew you guys together? Because I think a lot of our people, when they think about, do they want a partnership? Do they want to be solo? It's a hard decision. So what drew you guys together, and then maybe a pro or a con of having that partnership?
Yes, that's a good question. We do have different skill sets. I would say I was a little more tactical. I was more tactical on losing 30 grand than he was.
Very strategic. Good job. Right. We've been there. Don't worry.
He was a little more of like the idea guy. But I thought we balanced each other well because he was also a little bit better at the design. I have a really hard time seeing colors, and like I can see spaces really well. I can knock that wall out and this will look like this and that kind of thing. But you asked me to pick out a paint color and it's just hit me in the head with a tack hammer and call it a day because I don't want to do it. Yeah. So he was a lot better at that. We did have a lot of overlap, but then we also had differing skills.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. And then you also did some stuff from the vacation side, if I remember correctly, in Florida. Tell us a little bit about that. That'd be considered investment, right?
Right. Yeah. So I had a client of mine, real estate client, who moved to Florida and introduced me to somebody down there and was just giving me some numbers about how things work down there. And just good timing. It was March of 21. And so Florida was still at the bottom and they were offering all of these incentives to buy brand new houses down there. So I bought a 9-bedroom VRBO, just vacation rental kind of house.
Yep.
Yeah, it was doing really well. We ended up selling it just because it was a good time to cash it out. But I mean, yeah, we crushed it on that one. Right time, right place, right? Like it's so much about timing, oftentimes.
Totally. Is there something about investing out of state that you either didn't see coming or you thought would be maybe a little easier, and then you got into it and you're like, holy crap, this part is way harder than I thought of investing out of state?
Yeah, I mean, we only owned that property for a year and a half, maybe
Okay.
2 years.
Okay.
And in that amount of time, it got beat to hell, and I didn't realize how bad it got beat up. In fact, my dad went down there with some friends and stayed and sent me some pictures. And I'm like, oh my God, this thing is trashed. And so we had to put a bunch of money into it to fix it up, to get it ready to sell. So I was shocked at how hard people are, especially when you have 9 bedrooms, right? Because you're bringing in probably 4 or 5 families and they probably got their little kids that are on vacation and running their head through the wall for fun and whatever in the heck they're doing.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a surprise. The other thing is there's just a lot of nuances to real estate in other markets. We ended up losing our ass on another deal down there. This was a big blunder, but basically what it comes down to is I didn't understand the functionality of Florida real estate. It's a completely different animal than Denver real estate.
Sure.
And I put my faith and trust into somebody who I should not have.
Yeah.
That bit us in the ass too, right? So there, you got to take the wins with the losses and all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't say that I won't invest out of state again, but I will be much slower because I would really want to understand the market very clearly before I jump in.
Yeah.
So there would be a handful of in-person visits and interviewing multiple people to be my representative down there and that kind of thing. So it would be a little less jumpy.
No, and I think that's smart. And it's tough because so we did some stuff in multifamily out of state and you get like what the spreadsheet says. And then even though you go as conservative as you think, you still get in the middle of it and you're just like, holy shit, this is so much more in certain areas than you ever think, even if you're being conservative and realistic and trust people, whatever else, it happens.
Right.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about kind of your shift towards traditional real estate and then kind of more finding your purpose and avoiding burnout. I'd love for you to kind of expand on those things because that's one of the things that drew us when we first started talking.
Yeah. The reason I got into sales is pretty straightforward. I just saw that flipping houses as an individual, it was just a tough way to make money. And having my license, I was like, I can have less exposure and go make more money selling houses. And so that's why I made that transition. What aspect do you want me to really focus on with that transition?
So I'd kind of love you give a great speech. For those of you guys that haven't seen it, we did a boot camp with you guys last fall and we're planning another event coming up. But you talked about burnout. You talked about this amazing trip to Costa Rica. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your new outlook on life and which bleeds into your outlook on business of trying to avoid burnout, still work hard and enjoy your life. But I think that our audience would get a lot out of that, whether it's investment, real estate, or traditional. I think that message totally translates.
Absolutely. What happened was in 2020, I burned out, started doing this coaching, teaching thing, then found EXP, moved over. It was 6 months of getting my feet wet, understanding the platform, all of that kind of stuff. And then I started trying to build my team up. I was still selling a lot of houses at the time. And I mean, it was just a lot of things that I had on my plate. I just got to that point where I was fried. And this was before we sold our Florida house. I looked at my wife and was just like, we could move to Costa Rica. Like we could sell everything and like retire in Costa Rica, She's like, what are you talking? Like, we haven't even been to Costa Rica. Do you know anything about it? And I'm like, no, but we could sell all our stuff and retire there. And she's like, maybe we should just go visit. And I was like, okay, fine. But if we're going to do that, it's an extended stay, at least 5 or 6 weeks. So that's what we did. I stayed in a little tiny town called Tarcales, which is just north of Jaco. It's a fishing community. Apparently, they provide most of the fish for the entire country, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Just the nicest people ever. Nobody spoke any English, so we got pretty good at Spanish. Just some of the nicest people ever. I could go down a big rabbit hole with all of that, but kind of my big takeaways from Costa Rica, and the reason that I went was because I needed to decompress. I just needed a timeout. And sometimes we need that. It was probably the best thing that I could have done because before we left for Costa Rica, I was fried. I really was just burning the candle at both ends. It took me 3 weeks in Costa Rica having really nothing to do to finally come back down to like a normal baseline. It was 3 weeks of like, I would still wake up exhausted every day, 3 weeks of like my mind racing, 3 weeks of like, what do I need to do, and stress and all that kind of stuff. Finally, after 3 weeks, my body kind of reset. And I was like, okay, this is what it feels like to be human. Okay, cool. Like, all right, I remember this, I remember that I can take time outs during the day and listen to music. I remember what it looks like to look at the clouds. I remember what it looks like to listen to the birds. It was just a really good reset, and it completely changed my life, because when I came back from Costa Rica, it changed the way that I interact with my business and my life. And I've started to gain more clarity around what does it mean to be balanced. I've got a whole class that I teach on burnout, where essentially that's what we talk about is balance. So I'm learning how to play on the playground of craziness, of business, and not lose myself in it. I'm now, I don't know if you follow David Goggins. Yes. Yeah. He says in his book that he's a human experiment. He wants to see how far the human body can be pushed. So I'm kind of doing the same thing, but totally different. I'm running a human experiment on how to crush it in business, do something amazing and be top tier, and enjoy the ride, and be present, and be balanced, and feel good about it, and be with my family, and do all of these things. Is it possible to do that? Yeah. I believe that it is. And I've been back now for almost exactly a year. In fact, I was in Costa Rica this time last year. Okay. Yeah. We were on like week probably 3.5 or so. So kind of right in the middle of it. I feel like I have been able to create a lot of that. I still get stressed. I still get tired and all that kind of stuff, but it's not like before. I don't feel like I need to go to Costa Rica tomorrow or else I'm going to lose it. I feel good about where we're at, even though I'm pushing it super hard. So my biggest takeaways, I think, from Costa Rica are that our experience of life is more important than the outcomes that we are creating. And I learned different lessons while I was out there on how to do that, which is what I'm trying to implement now, figure it out, and eventually show other people how to do the same thing.
Yeah, I think there's such a great takeaway from that. I think that when you talk about where are you going and what is your journey, that's what I struggle with a lot too, is smelling the roses, as they say, and enjoying it. Because if not, then all you have is just these different types of summits that you're trying to make. And at what point are you ever really happy? And then you turn around and, I think, the interesting thing is our kiddos are at a little bit different points in life, but we quickly realized that the second school, like they don't really want to be around you, even if you're, have a great relationship with your kids, because their friends start to drive and they're busy and whatever else. So it's like, yeah, what's the point of all this? So yeah, I'm all about trying to smell the roses and trying to enjoy the journey. I don't always do the best job by any means, but you're right. That's the key, I think. Yeah. One of the great things about Raising the Flipping Bar is I get amazing guests like Dan, and we just kind of get going on stuff. And so I hate to pause. Stay tuned. We're actually going to have a part 2 coming up with Dan Gomer here as our next episode, because we're going to get into some of the amazing things that he's done from a life transformation standpoint, how he looks at things differently, how he builds his real estate team, and even how he's potentially going to maybe have his kiddos get involved in real estate. So definitely check back here for part 2, and we'll catch you guys on the flip side. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Raising the Flipping Bar. If you found value in our insights and stories, let's keep the conversation going. Connect with me on social media and be sure to share this episode with friends or colleagues who might benefit. Your feedback and reviews help us grow and reach more listeners like you. So please, if you enjoyed this episode, leave us a review. Thanks again to the Elevation Academy for sponsoring today's show. If you're interested in learning more, click the link in the show notes below. And remember, every property tells a story, every deal brings a lesson. Keep reaching for those goals, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening and watching Raising the Flipping Bar. Just a basic overall disclaimer is that A, this is not legal advice. B, this is not tax advice. C, this is not financial advice. I hope you get the gist, but I'm obviously not a lawyer, not a CPA. Hell, I'm not even a real estate agent, actually. But in general, we hope you get a ton of value out of this, but there is a bit of a disclaimer. Please consult a professional if you have any questions whatsoever. Thanks for tuning in.